Hello there, and welcome back to my panel here on gfaqs.com. I'm bringing you up now onto the Transformers Fall Cybertron leaderboard presentation, as I'm going to reintroduce my presentation for the makers of Strategy Tournament, or the M.o.S Outline. The M.o.S Outline here has met a couple of unique revisions, and so I'm going to reintroduce my proposal. Starting from here, this is also going to be a video link directly to gfaqs.com, and gfaqs.com link will be linked in the description below. Leave a comment, like or dislike, all below. All the same, your input here will help the general progression of the community's growth, including the community itself. Now, starting from the general thing here, there's not really a lot that I did have to revise, but I did have to put in a couple of specifics in order to incorporate a possible or pending 5 versus 5, but it will still be kept to a mandatory 4 versus 4. So, on behalf of the whole community here, so Yugal, Clunker Slim, Aswin, Numties, Polo Slash, Jedi Saber, Straxus Prime, Senator Shockwave, Julian, AB, Torquinus, Belmont Brawler, Blaze Enzon, and Lord Megatron 187. I will sit here this evening and reintroduce my proposal outline, taking it from the top. This will be here listed for the community in full. Bulletin 1. As restated and revised, this is again going to still be a best 2 out of 3 rounds or a best 3 out of 5 rounds, depending upon how much time is taken into consideration in setting up said clan battle, or in a whole afternoon's proceedings. Preferably this was set to a 3 versus 5, but due to the lot of us also having IRL concern that may also come in to being a huge factor at times, and this is understandable, then I can push also a 2 out of 3. I do want to try and see if we could do 3 out of 5, but the next best thing is the 2 out of 3 in order to go along here. A tie between clans will result in the tiebreaker game to be hosted by the person that scored with the least, or had the least amount of score gained from the past decisive session. This is actually going to be changed, as a couple of friends from the community, AB Jagadar 11 and Ethan Lamb 22, had challenged this specific rule in having brought up a very interesting point in a past post about how this would be, and that it's concerning because the person with the lowest score in the previous match, if they were to host, it opens the door for match fixings, for fixing a match, because achieving the highest score in the match is a lot harder to do. Achieving the least amount of score is easy to do, so anybody could easily pull a very crappy KD on purpose in order to set the stage for their team to win, and then go back to pulling a good game. That can't work. And what that does is that it questions the player's integrity in doing so, causing controversy in the process, and wondering, did you really do that badly all of a sudden, or no? And so that outline, that specific inclusion of Rule 1 is going to be changed to the person with the most score gained from the past decisive session. That way, if you want said person to host, then they got to pull to the top of the leaderboard for your team in order to have that respective opportunity to do so. If it's tied between said both people, then pick one or the other, or if you really want to be specific, look at deaths. That's all I'm going to say for that. That concludes my revision of Rule 1. Rule 2 is that this is a set 4 versus 4 with all the character classes that are to be exemplified of 1 scientist, 1 destroyer, 1 titan, and 1 scout class player at all times from start to finish of each session. Now, if you're wondering if said person or persons has the as I was saying, if you're wondering if person or persons have the ability to change their class choice, originally when I put this in place for creating Rule 2, I was going to make it so when you pick the class from start to finish, you don't change your classes. That was originally what I had that in mind, is so that way you don't change your class. Whatever role you pick, you keep it from start to finish, barring either a substitution or a disconnection, and then say, for instance, you lose said role. That possible scenario, in a sense, does challenge the set 4 versus 4, because if you want to try and have a substitute person from your clan come in order to take said person's place, then this is where it does create a loophole, which I do aim to tie up now. So, for instance, alright, you have all 4 classes here, like I previously aforementioned. Say the destroyer loads out, or the destroyer disconnects from the match, and you have a scientist, a titan, and a scout versus a team that has all 4 of them. If you want a sub to come in, this, in a sense, does still tie into the continuation of Rule 2's ruling, as where I had stated here about substitutions into the match that will also take said person's place and said person's given character role. So even though that destroyer lagged out, and you want to bring in another 4th, if you have another person of your team online, then that person will take said person's place as a destroyer. Even if they may not be good as it, that is the role that they will take, because that is the open slot that is now presented for them to take at this time. Now, this is for 4 versus 4, and the substitution outline here can still work for 4 versus 4 in that regard, barring a DC or if in real life concern happens, whereas said person or persons of any of those roles do have to leave and you want somebody else to come in. Open role is now taken by said person coming in that's subbing. Now, for a 5 versus 5, as a lot of people were trying to pitch here, and I can have an outline here also separate and created for 5 versus 5, which I do have finished. I was originally against having a 5 versus 5 outline because the premise of the M.o.S Outline was to work under 4 versus 4 only, which means that you would have to keep rotating people each round. That way everybody in the clan has a chance to respectfully represent the clan. There was a clan battle that had happened not that long ago with Tact versus the UNK Nation, where the whole clan battle was fought under the premise of M.o.S Protocol. And what I've studied in there is that when the 5 versus 5 happened, the 5th player, in a sense, was like a wild card player that could set up a legal, unbalanced team setting, or in some senses a one-sided state of affairs, and could be the second rule of a strong offense or a strong supporting role, and found ourselves more or less one team having a second medic as opposed to the other team having a second destroyer or titan by convenience. And so it reached a mute point, and not everybody was comfortable with that part of the clan battle because it seemed like it was highly unbalanced, with there being a shield versus a sword, rather than a sword and a sword or a shield and a shield, because it didn't feel balanced. I had questioned that at first to see if it could fairly work under the pretenses stated to allow the inclusions after that, because the counterbalance of wanting added players I made for that was to include another round. That way it would allow an easier rotation of other players and not the same players to have a turn to represent their clan as they are able to. Basically a fresh roster of people each round if the group is that big. That way you never reuse the same person or players twice. It would be rather needless to do so. Unless circumstances change, and there are times when circumstances do change. And so in continuing Rule 2, alright, for 5 versus 5, it'll still be all 4 of those. The 5th role I'm setting to be a mandatory second scientist. And I'm going to explain why this is only to be the second scientist, and only the second scientist. Alright, every class has 2 ways to play everything. That's why every class has 2 ability uses. For instance, Titan with Whirlwind and Shield, Scout with Cloak or EMP, Destroyer with a Barrier or Hover, and Scientist with a Sentry and a Medic. I'm picking Scientist overall as the choice here in question, because the scientist's roles for both roles can both be used to unique tactical extenses, one offensively, one defensively, that are not always picked by people. All three of the other classes given are nice to use, but at the same time are all mainly offensive builds. Very, very different builds, but offensive builds all the same. And I want to try to have this become more of the mindset of teamwork and gaining skills, and less of the factor of we're being on the same team but we're both basically just kill hoarding. I want to eliminate said B and I want to focus on said A, if you catch my meaning. And so while focusing on kills is nice, focusing on the whole point of team-based activities, which is the whole point of the clan battling element, is the focus of where I'm having my eyes right now set on the scientist. That way the scientist can see light. And so this will force the players to choose each role very carefully, while also potentially working outside of a comfort zone. That way you can expand your comfort zone and you don't have any crutch of any sort to fall upon. And so in 5 versus 5, I'm going to be focusing on a second scientist for 1 sentry and 1 medic. That way the medic can continue to support each role. That way the initial scientist doesn't have to choose too in-depthly between should I be a scientist and should I be a medic or should I be a sentry. When you pick one, then you pick it, and then you can go back and forth between as is as you need it, but then momentum drops depending upon how frequently you may keep changing. And so in 5 versus 5 you have 1 of each. That way you have both options respectively. However, what I'm going to try to do as a stimulation here for 5 versus 5 under this outline here is I'm going to eliminate the use of the gear shredder. And by eliminating the use of the gear shredder, this focuses more on communications and how the scientists play off of each other and how the teamwork plays to there being a sentry and there being a medic, as opposed to somebody just coming in, dropping it in gear shredder and keep going. And it rinses and repeats constantly. It can be rather frustrating in that outline. And so what I had here in revision of that revision of the revision is that I was going to have it so that way only one of the scientists can use the gear shredder and the other one cannot. But in the process of doing that, what that does is it stirs unnecessary confusion in the long term of a clan battle, because you could have a scientist person or someone who can conveniently come in and switch that is not aware of that specific knowledge that you need to know if said clan battle is upgraded to a 5 versus 5 under this protocol. And so rather than making it confusing and needless by introducing a specific element of miscommunications due to one small oversight that is very important, I would just eliminate the tool altogether. That way if said tool is just used in general in 5 versus 5, then it would be a point loss or a disqualification. Or if the community is opposed to this specific ruling that I want to try and have in place in order to try and make it more tactfully straightforward, then I can just have a gear shredder overall, and it still can be used if you so wish. I personally would like to eliminate it for 5 versus 5 only. Comment on your thoughts down below if you seek something different from this. And so to revise here for number 2, for 4 versus 4 under M.o.S, yes to gear shredder in 4 versus 4. In 5 versus 5 under M.o.S, I am saying no to gear shredder use in a 5 versus 5. Moving on into ruling in point 3. No sub-players are allowed in this outline. Only players of your respective clan are allowed to play at all times, and this substitution does not contradict the second ruling. So, in general, and in lamest terms, players from other clans, that's not allowed. And players from no clan in general, no vacant players, free agents. They are also not allowed in this. These are just of your respective teams, from your barracks only. Number 4, item detection anywhere is a disqualification. Anybody knows I give zero fucks about letting it slide. And that's the end of that. Now, if item use is seen by both teams or is detected by both teams, then the session is to be voided and redone as soon as possible. And no point is given to either party until the redo is finished at that time. Now, there was a point and a post in the original posting of this where there was somebody that wanted to have a mute point happen when this happens, where if both teams use an item, then the match still goes on and there's no penalty that is given since both teams would already be in the wrong. Now, by saying that, do you understand how that sentence contradicts itself? Because you broke a rule, but in the process of now both teams breaking the rule, there is to be no repercussion for breaking the rules. Wrong. There is a consequence for every action, and this is no exception. And so I aim to keep my ruling intact, as the session is to be voided and redone. Now, if time is of the essence and that happens to be the last match done, whichever one that is, if that's the last match that is to be completed or can be completed at that time, then that does stir something that may have to come into play, but it would only need to be in a need-be situation, which I highly doubt would happen. But if in need-be situation this does happen, okay, here's an option that I will give for this outline. That way, if said scenario does happen, then you do have something to go on, whether or not it is agreed upon or not. But the option is there, should said wrongdoing be delved into that heavily. Now, if one team uses it, then there would be a DQ for that team using said item. Now, if both people or both teams use an item and they're both disqualified and the match is null and void, then win or lose of that match, the session will be complete. However many rounds there was already, that will determine the winner or loser, or if the match truly did end in a tie game, because this session where item use is being detected now no longer matters. And so at that point, the match would be finished, and maybe only 1 point would be awarded to each team for having item use in full. Now, if item use is used by accident, which I don't think it can be used by accident at this point in the video game, then that's another story. But if it's used on purpose, and it most likely may be used on purpose, then that's going to be that. However, if an item is picked up but is not used, then that is tricky, because that does deter a controversy, because that does spur item detection, but it does not insinuate item use. And there is a difference between the two, because there are certain maps where you can accidentally land on an item and pick it up, like Corrosion, with the ammo box sitting right there in center of the whole battlefield on top of the railings where a lot of combat is usually seen, or even on Spire or Array, right there in center where there's an item conveniently right there in spots where a lot of action can pick up. And so when you go to reload, it's only natural that by accident you accidentally click and pick up the item without realizing it, if you so happen to hover over it or around it. In that situation, this will be the referee's decision, or if there is no ref, then it has to be unanimous between how many people saw it used or how many people did not see it used. If enough credibility is given in said argument, then it can be overlooked. But if there is no credibility given in the argument, If it is not seen or witnessed, or if it is seen or witnessed, if there is no pending credibility, then the session will be redone as quickly as possible. Same host, same stimulations as it was when the match first started before said controversy happened. That'll take care of item 4. Rule 5, the rescheduling. So, in real life things happen between us all, so the likelihood of these needs to be realized and appreciated. In past clan battle tournaments and structures, I've noticed a huge disregard for in-real-life factors by past clans, clan leaders, and individuals that have happened for a long time with how general arrangement of clan battles happen. You want to keep in mind that this is a video game, so all the constant rushing BS is to not be had. If I find out that it is done by coaxing an unofficial clan battle, or if anything that was not completely agreed upon was taken in full and done, then said team that did instigate this will be given a point deduction or disqualification by default. As much as most battles do need to finish, if it can't finish in any way at that time, barring how much time you actually have to play it, then it needs to be a continued arrangement for another time, and that needs to be respected. Said circumstances that will vary in this do include what it is you have listed below. Now, what it is that I did create here below based off of past instances that I've read over here on gfaqs.com over the past 4 years of the CBL League's inclusion in online activities for this video game. Also, in addition to this, any session of a set clan battle or clan battle itself, should it not be complete, is to be arranged within a time-space setting within 2 weeks' time. No more, no less. 2 weeks. That's 14 days. Now, should a continued clan battle arrangement exceed the maximum time span of 2 weeks, then a fail-safe will be invoked at that time. And so this is the fail-safe that's going to be invoked by myself or said assistant or assistants. Upon exceeding the max time, both clan leaders are to meet at the earliest convenience to set a specific time and day that is to be met. Now, if this is not met or understood by either party, then the clan battle overall between both parties will conclude with the score intact as it last stood before the continuation was set to occur. If that makes sense. In modern day playing online, a lot of factors, a huge variance of factors can play into a lot of things being postponed, barring general procrastination. And I know there's a few old school players that if you're reading this, you do wish to challenge procrastination and dragging out the pointlessness or inevitability of something, but I am not to see that happen at this time. I wish to hear what it is I'm saying on this ruling for number 5. Point 6, or ruling 6, the timing. I'm putting it in so this is not complied or implied. Alright, so we all agree to set times for these things. People do appear late at times, and that is fine. Other times, though, it is not as accepting. When a clan battle starts, the time span of 30 minutes maximum will be allotted here. So if said lateness does delay the progress of a clan battle past 30 minutes, a half hour, then I will state that the team lacking members at that point will unfortunately be deducted 1 point, and the CB is to end right there. Now, both teams are called to wait from both sides due to reason, then a rescheduling session will be done, and that goes back into point 5 of rescheduling clan battles. So 1 point feeds into another point, and so there's no point that I have to continue to make there. Number 7 is disconnection. And so disconnections do happen with a lot of varying hosts that are still on the grid now. Alright, a new host end session will be given if the environment is not fully playable within reason and is understood by all the members involved. So this is not just the clan leaders' decisions, this is also a group consensus. So if no one's host is manageable, then a third party will host the one session or all if need be. The third party session is to not be of either team, otherwise it will be an unfair host advantage. This also includes the substitute players, or the players that are not going to be sitting out. Even if their host is good, then it complicates things because it is going to be respectfully for their team, and it does create, in some sense, an unfair advantage. And so the person who's going to be hosting this, the third party host, if need be, is going to be said assistant that I am hiring in order to see to the continual enforcement of these rules, also if I am not around. With all 7 bulletins in question, this does generally cover my entire synopsis of the M.o.S Outline, or Makers of Strategy Clan Battle Protocol Outline, that can be taken in tow for our community here. And the final thing I'm revising, and this will be my final point about it before I do close my segment here on GameFAQs, is the outline for it being a tournament, as there is presently not a sufficient number of clans on the grid in order to see to the full implementation of this proposal's initiative, as there's only a total of about 6-ish. I don't know, it teeters somewhere around that number. And so what I'm going to have to do as a counter proposal to the original chock-full outline here is I'm going to have to see how this can be implemented for a 6-clan community. Or if other clans do happen to come up in the future, then that can also generally help this along. That way there's more options to work with, and amidst more options for clan activities, it also creates more general diversity for clans. And so I'm wanting to upgrade this from being restricted to the tournament that I'm trying to create. Instead, having it be restricted to the tournament, I want to make this as a general use and overall fair use of activity for the entire community to use, PS3 and PlayStation 4 all together. There are those that do play PlayStation 4 only because they only have the PS4 version, and they do wish to try and delve into a lot of the activities and general engagings and dealings that do happen on PS3, but they're not always in the loop. And so for how this outline is, I want to have the structure open not just for all of PS3 people in our community, but also for all of PlayStation 4, for those on PlayStation 4 that do wish to know or be up to date or caught up to date on general activities or dealings in the community. And so by the process of doing this, this could also potentially unify both communities respectfully in trying to just continue to enjoy the game in a completely different aspect, as opposed to doing the same repetitious thing, just occasionally trying something new and testing the boundaries of that which seems comfortable or comes naturally to you. And so, with that having been said, this does bring my overall portion and segment here on GameFAQs.com to its conclusion. And to all of my colleagues online here that do participate in a lot of the activities or in the big events on Fall of Cybertron, and all the figureheads that have come before me, and those that have even launched past tournaments or general community activities before my time, I do thank you all for taking the time to sit here on GameFAQs and listen to my segment. It does mean a lot to me. I do wish to continue seeing to the community's growth and success as my contribution does continue to go, and I do wish to also have your input along with it, that way it can continue to go even further. This is Rodimus Prime signing off. Y'all have a good night, and as always, till all are one.